Thank you, an extra special thank you today to all of you for braving the weather and the construction to come out and see us today. We're thrilled to have you all here once again for another exciting installment of the 2014 Food for Thought lecture series at the Whaling Museum. If you haven't already, please take the time now to silence your cell phones as not to disrupt the presentation. We thank you, as always, for supporting this free community program, which is made possible in part by the M.S. Worthington Foundation. Today we have with us David Dunn. David is a travel writer and a filmmaker from Nantucket. He studied film at Hunter College in New York City and spent 5 years living and exploring the deserts of the Southwest. David has traveled around the United States on his motorbike to some of the most forgotten cities and towns the country has to offer, logging over 25,000 miles in 2013 alone. David continues to travel, documenting the places that he goes and the people that he meets. Today, he will share with us his experience in which he dropped everything, hopped on his motorbike, and spent a month on the road in the middle of winter with the goal of helping others. What ended up happening was a series of unforgettable encounters. So please, everyone, join me in giving a warm welcome to David Dunn.
How you doing, guys? How's everybody doing? Well, thank you so much for coming out. I know that the weather is absolutely miserable, and the snow, and as I said, the construction out front, so I really appreciate you guys coming out and listening to what I have to say. A little about me. As was said, I am from here. I grew up in Nantucket, went to school here, went out west, lived in Arizona for about 5 years. I studied business at the University of Arizona and found out that living in an office, working in an office, all that kind of stuff was absolutely not what I wanted to do. And I took some time off, came here, spent a lot of time on the island trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to do with my life, and I decided that I should probably go to film school, and that's what I did. I went down to New York City and attended Hunter College, studied film production, and just started to figure out a way that I could pair motorcycles, which is what I was doing on the side, with what I did professionally, which was now making movies and stuff like that. So, with that said, I started going out and just riding, and sometimes I would have no idea where I was going. I would just get on my motorcycle. I'd have 4 or 5 days. I'd hop on and just go. Wherever I ended up is where I ended up, and the people I met along the way ended up being the point of the trip, which was just really incredible. One of the first trips that I took, that was the first thing that I really kind of, I felt like I was doing something a little different, was after Hurricane Sandy, I ventured down to Staten Island, and if I could get the computer to work. Ventured down to Staten Island after Hurricane Sandy. There was a neighborhood that was particularly hit hard, and I was able to make it there and talk to some of the people that were there. Does anybody want to come and take a look at this? So I made it to this neighborhood, and I ended up parking my motorcycle. The streets were just littered with debris. It was miserable. It looked like bombs had gone off. Houses were lifted up from their foundations and shifted into the middle of streets. There were boats leaning on top of houses. It was not pleasant. So, we start this over again. Don't look. So, okay, there's the title slide. So coming into this neighborhood, I passed this gas station, and there was a line just out, people on foot. Their cars had no gas. They had no heat for their houses and whatnot. So these people were in this line, and when they saw me with a camera, they thought that I was with the press. They ushered me over. They asked, hey, can you listen to us? Can you listen to what we have to say? And what they were saying was nobody came and got help to them. What was being said on the news around New York was that Staten Island was just inundated with all of this support. These communities had the aid that they needed, and from what I could tell and what they were telling me, that wasn't what actually happened. Despite all this, they insisted that I take a picture of them so they could pose. And despite the hardships that these people were facing, they just were able to maintain this incredible perspective on life, their situation. and they were just, they were standing in this line for gasoline for hours. I know that when I took this trip, I had a half a tank of gas, so I made it to Staten Island, parked, and when I left, I had to search for gas, and I ended up having to go all the way into Connecticut, about 50 miles, just to try to find fuel. And these people just, they're supposed to be living in this city that has so much to offer. There's aid coming from all these different departments, but unfortunately, it wasn't making it to this community. When I was there, I probably spent 7 hours, 8 hours roaming around this neighborhood, and these were the only two soldiers that I saw that were, I don't know what they were doing. They just walked around assessing the situation, and that was it. And you can see some of that. This house there's the soldiers again. This older gentleman, it's later on in the afternoon, I'm walking down the streets, and I see this guy. The street's totally empty, and this guy, he walks out of his building, his house, and he's got a couple of baseball caps, New York Yankees and something else. And he walks down, and you can see in front of people's houses, they just put their belongings. All of their possessions just go on the street to be thrown away. Things that these people built their lives around, just in the streets. And so this gentleman walks out with these two caps, and he puts them down in the pile to be thrown out. They're covered in mud. It's gross. He turns and he walks back to his house. He gets about halfway, and he pauses again. He returns to the hats, and he picks them both up, and he just starts staring at them. And he just, it's one of those things that it really kind of puts things into perspective. This guy, his whole life is destroyed, and he's holding on to, I don't know what memories he has tied to those hats. Maybe he just likes the New York Yankees. I don't know. But it was just one of those really touching moments that nobody was else on the street, and it was an incredible moment to just see this guy kind of reevaluating what mattered to him in life, which, I think everybody goes through that at some point. Unfortunately, sometimes it happens after events like this. This photograph, a little bit before that, I'm walking down the street, and I look down, and I see this picture of this little girl, and I bend down, I take a picture of it, I pick it up, and this woman who was coming out of a house, to my left, she sees me looking at it, and she walks up closer, and it turns out it was a picture of her niece that had been taken out of a photo album, washed away, and was just sitting in the mud. So you see, walking through this neighborhood, you see all of these different parts of people's lives just scattered about, and it's devastating. This little girl, this was sitting outside of a house that, as I was taking this picture, a woman who had a reflective vest, that some kind of authority figure was going through, and they're trying to clear the houses to make sure that there isn't somebody stuck inside who, unfortunately, has passed away. But as I was taking this picture, she's coming into the building, and they're trying to find out if anybody's there. And I was talking to a gentleman with this house. His house burned down, and the only thing remaining was the steel headboard. Otherwise, everything else was destroyed. And the guy was on the verge of tears, standing to my right, just trying to tell me what had happened and how long he had been there. He'd been there for a number of years and lost everything. The picture of the little girl I just showed you was on the side of this house. So this is moments after they had gone in to try to figure out what the situation was. And like I said, the storm surge brought all these things forward, and it's so hard to imagine that so much destruction could happen in New York City. That they have the resources to take care of it, but yet a week later, 5 days later, it was just still in complete disarray. And I know after an event like this, it's a tremendous amount of work, but these people were saying that they had no help. Nobody had come and assisted them. So that was after Hurricane Sandy, and it was obviously very disturbing to go and talk to these people and have them just almost to talk to somebody, to tell their story to somebody, anybody that would listen, was really unique. And so after Sandy, I about a year went by. I was doing little trips, but nothing really monumental, nothing. It was just for myself. And this past fall, I was doing a little bit of research about Detroit and trying to figure out what the deal is there. You hear all this stuff on the news, you hear what the conditions is, and I almost didn't believe it. I couldn't believe that a city that helped to build the American dream, the auto factories, everybody had jobs, they were able to afford houses, everything was great, and then it just stopped. And everything was sent overseas, and the community just died. And so I just felt the need to go and see it firsthand. And so in September, I got on my bike in New York and decided to head that way. And when I left, I wasn't sure if I was going to actually make it to Detroit, and went through Scranton and had lunch, and I figured, I might as well just go. I mean, there's a lot of people that they read about it, that's enough for them. They don't want to experience it. They don't want to see, what it is like firsthand. And for me, that was one of the reasons I couldn't finish business school, was I couldn't sit in an office reading about everything else happening. So I decided to go out and see, and I came off the exit ramp behind me, off the highway, and there's appliances just littering the exit ramp, washing machines, dryers, just littered. And I all right, well, not a really good first impression. That's kind of not really welcoming. So I come off the highway, and this actually used to be a gas station. Behind this charred boat was the foundation for the service station. The pumps were a little bit to the left. And at this time, on the last trip, I was into Staten Island. I was on an older BMW. This trip, I made the mistake of taking a 2008 BMW. And taking a gold 2008 BMW to Detroit makes you stand out a lot. And so I was standing, I was off the bike, I was taking pictures, and it's oddly quiet, and I turn around behind me, and there's a car that's stopped in the middle of the road. And in it is about 3 or 4 guys. They got hoods on. They just were the most intimidating looking guys. And, it's one of those things, we exchanged this glance. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel welcome. They obviously didn't want me there. It was best that I move on, and so I did, further into the neighborhood. And from there, I ended up stumbling upon this, what I think was some kind of general store. The front windows have been boarded up and stuff like that, and it's obviously charred out. But reading over the door was 1944. The building was erected in 1944, so I thought that this is remnants of what Detroit looked like when it was thriving, when this was a little neighborhood. It could have been a corner store, a neighborhood, anything like that. And so I'm off the bike, and I'm standing there, and it's so hard to believe that this is in the United States. I mean, this looks war-torn, it's scary. So I'm standing there, and see if this will work. So I don't know if there's supposed to be audio to this. I don't know if there is. It doesn't sound like it. But all of a sudden, this ice cream truck just drives through the neighborhood with this little eerie sound going. And it was so bizarre because you're around such destruction. An ice cream truck is indicative of like a wonderful childhood. People grew up there. It's like the people left, the buildings are falling, but there's still these reminders of what life used to be like in the area. I went further in, and these are houses that are just falling apart, burned out, destroyed. I was down the street from this, and there was a couple of a man and a woman sitting alongside a building looked just like this. Same kind of thing. They look at you like you're an outsider, like you shouldn't be there. And it's not a good feeling to have, but at the same time, it makes you want to go further. It makes you want to figure out why there's that animosity. I was at an intersection here, and you could tell that the buildings that were made of wood versus the buildings that are made of brick, because the ones that were made of brick were still standing. Everything else was burned to the ground, just gone. And what was kind of sad is on some of these buildings, I don't know if I have any pictures in here, but you can see the names of the proprietors of these businesses. It was John's Tool and Die or Bill's Tire Repair or anything like that. So you think about, Bill. What about Bill's family? this building is crumbling. His job is obviously gone. Maybe he's been gone for decades. What happened to these people? Where did they go if they're not here? And it's devastating. This was the main drag through the neighborhood, and you can tell there's nobody on the road. Another corner store sitting on the left there, and there's just nobody around. And it's ghostly. And what was bizarre, and I'd done research after, but there's this hum in this particular neighborhood. It's always going, and you can't really tell what it's from. And there's another facility that's actually to the right of where I'm standing. You can see the entrance to the driveway. There's a facility there, and apparently it's got government contracts, but nobody really knows what happens there. They have security, like border protection security around, but nobody knows what it is. And apparently in Canada, that hum is so prevalent that people aren't living in the neighborhood on the shore on the other side of the Detroit River because that hum at certain times of the day is unbearable. And nobody really knows what it's called or where it's emanating from. It's totally bizarre. But with that said, there are plants around that same thing. There's this chugging. If you think of the sounds that Detroit might have made in its heyday, these sounds of building and construction and manufacturing, you can almost hear these faint noises as you're going through the neighborhood. Some of the houses that stand that are in better shape, you can tell they're brick. This one I walked up to take a picture, and if you see on the window, there's a sign that says something to the effect of, a homeless person lives here, please stay out, please don't burn it down, which is kind of devastating. These people are going into these old homes, and they're just trying to find shelter, but they have to worry about people coming and burning it down, presumably for fun or whatever kicks they get out of it. And it's just devastating that look at where we all live here. We live on one of the most magnificent islands in the world, and we have an amazing environment which we call home. But some people have to move into places like that, and it's heartbreaking. Continuing through Detroit, you just see houses that are, this one's been long abandoned. Behind it and to the left, there's actually a huge plant. I drove down this road, or what was a road, but so much vegetation has grown over, a car can't pass. It's long gone. This building here to the left that's crumbling was a recreation center for kids. And it was just falling down. The sign still read out front. You could tell what it was. And in the background, there's this playground, and when I arrived, there was two young girls playing on this playground. And it's just, they're probably 6 or 7 years old tops. But you look at what environment they're playing in. It's dangerous, it's sad, and they don't know anything else. I don't know if you can see in this other picture, there's a house. I guess not. It's the same building. There's a house to the left of this, and I pulled up to the stops. I don't know why, but I pulled up to the stop sign for the sheriff's benefit. I stopped, put my foot down, and there's a house that had this tire fire in the backyard, this black, sooty smoke. And there was about 4 guys there's a truck in the driveway, and they're drinking beer, and they've got the torn off sleeves, and they look like a surly bunch. Like, I don't want to mess with these guys. And as soon as I stop, they start pointing, they start yelling at stuff, and I'm like, again, it's one of those situations where you're not supposed to be there, and you really should go, but you desperately want to know what they're talking about. I didn't have the guts to stick around, and probably for the best, so I shot out of there. And actually, after that had happened, a few moments later, maybe a couple minutes, I got down the road, and a red pickup truck, showed up in my rearview mirrors. And you can tell there's nobody there. It's empty. And so when you're driving around, you can kind of tell when the car is kind of sticking close by. You make a turn, they make a turn, you make another random turn, they make the same one. And so this went on for a little bit. It's very, very bizarre. But they were following me through this neighborhood, and now I don't know where I'm going. And so I'm hoping that after every turn, there's not a blockade of debris, there's not their friends. I don't want to run into their friends and have to fork over my motor. Like, it was kind of terrifying. So I was able to make my way back onto the boulevard, this one right here, And I went, and went very fast, and they came out of the neighborhood. They made the left turn behind me, and the road kind of curves with the Detroit River, and it brings you back onto a main thoroughfare. I mean, it's by no means populated, but at least it has traffic signals that work. And so I pulled up to the stoplight. I'm in the right lane, trucks coming over the hill, and I was terrified. I was very scared. And so I make the turn, and I blast down this road. And I'm coming up on, I didn't know it at the time, but the Ambassador Bridge, the bridge into Canada. And so there was this little service road on the right, and I was able to pull in. I kind of tucked my bike behind a Jersey barrier, and there's some abandoned road equipment. And at this point, I could see downtown Detroit. I'm in a suburb here, about half a mile away from downtown, mile away. And I kind of camp out there for a little bit. I'm looking over to Canada, and it's just, I've never been to Canada. I've never been on the other shore. I don't know. But I can't imagine that it's anything like our side. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. So I'm looking through these chain link fences. I'm looking at this other side, and from what I can tell, they have green grass. And they have what looks like a really nice promenade along the water, something that people can enjoy. But on our side, we've got a factory that makes these really ominous noises. We've got people chasing people through neighborhoods. It's just a very hostile environment, and it's separated by 100 yards of water. It's totally bizarre. Yeah, this plant right here, you're looking. The name escapes me now, but that ahead of me, this is a little kind of oxbow, diversion from the Detroit River, and that is apparently the facility that makes this really weird noise. That's one of the roads going to the plant that it was the road to this facility, but now the vegetation is completely grown over. I was actually walking back there, and I'm looking at this tree, and I'm like, it's a bizarre looking tree. There's no bark on it. And I'm looking at it, and I'm realizing it's a pole. It's the lighting for what was the parking lot for people to presumably go in, park their cars, and and go into work. But now it's nature is reclaiming everything. And so we've reappropriated wood for building houses and building light poles, and it's going back to nature. It's incredible. This shot, which I thought was pretty interesting, is on that main boulevard going into downtown Detroit. And as I was going into downtown Detroit, you have traffic signals that are going through the motions, but there's not many cars. At each light, you would think in a big city there'd be big traffic. Not the case here at all. And you go through the motions. Parking meters are all flashing expired. It's. If you ever have a chance to go, I highly suggest it. Or not, if you want to. I'll do it for you. But I get to downtown Detroit, and I'm walking around, and I hear this tooting of a horn. And I'm like, that's weird. So I'm walking around these skyscrapers. I mean, I'm noticing in front of the Ford building, there's not a single foreign car. There's not a Ford car. There's not even an American-made car in front of the Ford building. And so I'm following the sounds, and I come across this. And it's a jazz festival in the heart of Detroit. And it's the most positive group of people. These people are wearing their best clothes. They are having the best time. There's men in these crisp suits and their little hats, and they're all clean shaven. They got their patent leather shoes, and they're out having a great time. And it was magnificent. It was absolutely wonderful. The turnout wasn't huge because not a lot of people live in Detroit. But the people that were there were so appreciative of this festival. And it was a little gem amidst this destruction. And it's this type of thing. It's these types of organizations that hopefully will breathe new life into Detroit. I mean, you can get past the violence, and if people can get back on track with all that kind of stuff, there is a community in Detroit that is looking to making it better, to making it into a livable city again, a city that has a viable economy, things that employ people. I mean, you have you have a workforce that is trained in manufacturing for the most part. If we were able to bring stuff back there and bring manufacturing back to Detroit, there are people that would do those jobs. There are creative outlets in Detroit, festivals like this. I've read about, I didn't see it on this trip, but there's a neighborhood in Detroit or in the area where you basically are given a house if you live there for 2 years and contribute to the creative community as a writer, a painter, an artist, anything like that. They're trying to bring creative work back to Detroit, and Detroit may not come back as a manufacturing hub. It may not come back to its former glory, but at least it'll be populated by a community that is willing to work towards building something worthwhile. And it's absolutely magnificent. And actually, I think the next one has audio, so I don't know if there's a way to figure out. I don't know if it'll play at this. You can tell that they're trying to work towards a community that's just, it's pretty incredible. So on the way back from Detroit, to be honest with you, I can't tell you if it was a weekend or a weekday. I don't remember. It could have been. But I was in Ohio somewhere, and I decided to get off the highway and just kind of look around, and I found this spot, and I didn't know where I was going to stay the night. I didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't know anything about it. I decided to stop and try to figure it out. And the sun was coming down in the sky as I was standing amidst these cornfields, and it was just, it was beautiful. It was a really nice, it's a juxtaposition against what I saw earlier in the day, which was destruction. This is when I was on my way out there. This is in eastern Pennsylvania. I left earlier in the morning, and there's just this fog in the valley. It was beautiful. Another picture of that cornfield. And you can tell that bike is a nice-looking bike. It's pretty. People kind of like that. So I don't know if I'll take that to places like Detroit again. So that all leads us up to this past December. And again, I probably should have waited to the warmer months. But in December, I decided that I was going to spend a month on the road driving across the country. Initially, I had reached out to a bunch of hospitals along the way, and what I wanted to do was I wanted to provide kids with arts and crafts supplies at a hospital, give them the markers, the pens, all this kind of stuff, paper, have them write notes and draw pictures, and I'd load them into the back of my motorcycle, and I would take them to the next hospital and create this chain link across the country, and I could do it along the way. Two things happened. It didn't work out how I planned. But it didn't work out how I planned for the best possible reason. I had a couple hospitals on board, and like the days I'm in touch with them leading up, I'm pulling into Tucson, I get a phone call or an email. There's not enough kids in the hospital. In fact, there's no kids in the hospital. So I'm like, well, that's great. Like, that's wonderful. Like, how can you be mad about no kids in the hospital? My plan didn't work, but for the best reasons. So anyway, I left, I was supposed to leave December 26th, so I left the island. I went to Western Massachusetts, celebrated Christmas with my family, went down to New York, and this was the day that I was supposed to leave, and I had a bunch of equipment in the mail that never showed up on time. So from the start, I had to push my day back. And so this trip I was taking a 1999 Kawasaki KLR 650. And this bike, actually, the Marine Corps uses a variation of this bike. It has a different motor. It has a motor that can run on almost any type of fuel. But this motorcycle, unlike the BMW, can run on anything. It can drive over anything. It looks ugly. Nobody's going to want to mess. I've got a sheep pelt seat on it. It just looks bad. So that's what I decided to take across. It has no heated grips, the windshield is aftermarket, there's no protection from the wind, it's just a rugged bike. And I chose this bike because when I got out west, I had intentions leaving the highway for a little bit and seeing what the desert has. It had been a long time since I'd been there, and I thought, hey, I'll go out and explore again. So I left at the end of December, I think 27th. You can see the cockpit here. I have GPS, power supply on the right for my phone and everything like that. And it was loading the day I loaded it up, leaving East Harlem, and realized that I couldn't take half the stuff I wanted to take. So I'm running in and out, and I'm burning up daylight, so I gotta go. So I'm throwing stuff in and cut out what I wanted to take. So I leave New York City, and I'm heading along, and I'm going through Pennsylvania, and everything's fine. It's just, I've driven it a million times before. I'm sure you've all driven on the East Coast. There's not much to look at. Continued on my way, going into, I don't know if it was Maryland or wherever I was, but I heard a bang from the front wheel of my bike. And I'm like, oh no, I can't turn around, 6 hours into this. This is going to be humiliating. I got to hide out for 6 weeks. I can't do this. So I go through a toll booth. I pull over. I'm looking at it. And I'm realizing that something happened with the hub of my motorcycle. The speedometer had no longer worked, and I was looking at it. Everything was okay. I didn't say, it was nighttime. I probably should have handled it differently, but I got on the bike, and I continued to, I think this is in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and I called ahead. It's a campground, and I told them I needed a campsite, and they were telling me that I was crazy, that it was 30 degrees, and they hadn't seen a camper come through there in months. And they're like, do you really want one? We can give you a cabin. I said, no, I want a tent. I want to try it this way. So I get there, and to go along with the fact that I don't prepare for things, I had never set my tent up before. So trying to set up a tent in the middle of the night with the light from a motorcycle is really difficult. So I get in there, and I cook up a little bit of dinner. It's a little MRE pack thing. I just heated it up, ate it, and it was fine. The next morning, it was pouring rain. And so I wasn't about to start getting out into the weather and start breaking myself. So I spent about 5 hours in my tent in the middle of the day, just bored out of my mind. And so bored that I eventually went to the main office of the campground, and I started talking to Mitch. And Mitch is the kind of guy that works in a campground. He is a very unique kid. I went and I spent an hour with him talking to him, and I shot some footage of him. I just shot so much. This would have had to be my own lecture series for the next 12 weeks. This kid was so bizarre. I mean, we're talking, and he's telling me all this stuff. I think he's a senior in high school, and this is his weekend job or whatever. And he's, take me through the day in your life, man. Tell me about yourself. And so he proceeds to go to the shelf, and I got a camera set up, and I'm asking him, and he's pulling off what looks like a lantern or box of lantern or something like that. And he's taking off, he's answering, he's putting it back, and he'll walk over here and he'll answer another question. He'll walk back to that same lantern, and he took the same lantern off the wall 6 times. And I'm trying not to laugh at this as I'm looking at him through the camera, and it was just so bizarre. And he's telling me the weirdest things that he saw at this campground. And I guess there's some weird stuff that happens at this campground, stuff that I'm not going to go into right now. So from there, I hit the road again, and I'm stuck in the rain. And to be honest with you, I'm not as hardcore as I seem with motorcycles. I like a hotel every now and then. And so in the rain and so I found this hotel, spent the night here, and it was great. I can't tell you where it was. Georgia, maybe. Same picture. Every night, everywhere I stopped, I tried to take a picture of the place I stayed. And at night, there's nobody there. You get to a hotel. I'm not going to go talk to the clerk for a few hours. I did that enough with Mitch. And so you go outside, and I started playing with my camera and trying to figure things out. So this is a picture that I thought looked pretty unique from in front of my hotel. So I made it to Anderson, South Carolina, or Yeah, Anderson, South Carolina. And I got this campsite, and I set everything up, and it was great and fun. The next morning, I woke up and started talking to this woman named Chris. Chris and her sister are one of the only female, made some hot chocolate, are some of the only, they might be the only two female Campground of America owners in the country. And these two sisters, one of them worked in administration at a college, the other one did something else. They both decided to quit their jobs in the mid-'80s and buy a campground. And so Chris has been there since, like, I think mid-'85, '86, something like that, and she and her sister run this place. And it was so nice, because what I found was these people, there's a whole subset of individuals out there. I mean, we know the people we know, but there's like communities around the country. At these campgrounds, there are people that only live in campgrounds. They have trailers, and they go and they live in campgrounds for 4 months, and then they leave, and they go and live in another campground for 4 months. And it's this nomadic culture. They're like gypsies, just making their way across the country. I didn't know that was a thing, but apparently it is. So I pull over. I like abandoned things and destroyed things and things forgotten. So I found this building. This one is on the border of South Carolina and Georgia. I have to look at a map. I'm embarrassed to say. I don't know if they share a border. But I saw this sign. It's an old abandoned lottery building. So I pulled over, took a couple pictures, and I looked over to my left on the other side of the highway, and there's this restaurant called Dad's. And having one, I thought, well, I'll take a picture. And I went into Dad's, and it's a gas station, but if you go in, there's a little diner inside. So I sit down, and I'm just doing my own thing, and I order a cheeseburger and a Coke, and it tasted how you would imagine. And the waitress comes over, she sees my camera, and she asks, what are you doing? Why are you here? And I tell her, I say, I'm going across the country. This was my original plan. Things are not working out the way I wanted it to, so right now I'm just trying to document the people that I meet along the way. And she says, well, the owner of this place is at the next table. Do you want me to introduce you? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. So I sat down with Carol on the right and her best friend Jean on the left. And Carol's father started Dad's restaurant in that area. It's Livonia, Georgia, if I remember proper. It's right on the border. And they have been in this town for decades. And her father has owned this place, and then she took it over about 10 years ago. And they just run it. And she's married, and Jean, she'd be devastated if I didn't mention her. She is an accountant, and she was very proud of that. Very, very sweet women. And I sat down and probably talked to them for 45 minutes. Gary, Carol's husband, showed up, and they were telling me about the history of the town. And the history of the town was pretty cool. Carol's father knew a guy who was in charge of planning the highway. And they worked out some kind of deal where in the 50s they diverted the road about a mile south from where they had planned because her father owned a bunch of land. So they work out some kind of deal. He erects this truck stop, which I guess in its heyday was the place to be. So they're telling you about there's still the good old boy network. There's still these people that'll do a favor if you'll do a favor, and I got your back kind of thing. And it was cool. Gary also told me that there are a lot of moonshiners still operating in the neighborhood, and they are populating the hills, and they are doing what they do. And I guess that was a huge thing back then, and it's still thriving today. But Gary was so sweet. Carol and Jean had to go to a doctor's appointment or something like that. But Gary sat and talked to me for a little bit, and he was incredibly gracious and extended himself to me whenever I passed through there again. So I continued on my way. I stopped in Mobile, Alabama, and spent the night. And as I pulled in that night, the issue of my front motorcycle wheel was happening again. It was making a weird noise. My brakes were a little bit weird. I was getting a little bit nervous. I'm so far from home. I have no connections. At this point, it's New Year's Day. It's January 1st. Called a bunch of dealerships, seeing if anybody had the time to look at the tools. Nobody's open. So I've got nowhere to go. I have to continue forward. So I topped off the brake reservoir with brake fluid and continued forward. I had enough brake pressure to feel safe. I continued down the road, and I found this old inn, or this old motel, totally abandoned. And so I'm looking around here and looking in the windows, and it's ghostly. Again, it's like what used to be. I mean, this is right outside of Mobile, Alabama. You got the abandoned, or the pool filled up with gross water, and just, nobody's around. And so I continued down the road, and I'm going down this dirt road. I broke off from the main drag, and I want to explore. There's some train tracks. I want to get off the road. I want to meet some people. I'm going down this road, and I lose my brakes. I have no brakes at all. And so I'm careening down here, and I don't know what I'm going to do. So I get to the other end, and I putter to a gas station. And then there's this fellow. So I pull up to a gas station, realize what's happening. My front brake is now disintegrated. The brake fluid is pouring out. The caliper is totally shot. I don't have the parts to fix it. So I go back down the road on that main boulevard. I saw a small gas engine repair shop. And I pull in, and this guy comes out of this shed, this building. I don't know what it is, but he emerged with his dog. And he's got his drink in one hand, a cigarette in the other hand. And he's got the thickest accent. He's just, if my brother was here, he'd be able to take it. You can't understand what he's saying, and I got a helmet on, so I'm nodding, like, oh, is he here? I don't know what you're talking about. So he's telling me, go back down the road, maybe you can find something. I can't help you. Okay, that's fine. So he disappears back into the weird shed flea market that he is running. It was weird. Like, there's stuff there that you wouldn't even buy new. It was a lot of weird stuff. So I backtrack. I head back towards Mobile. I still have no front brake. So at every intersection, I'm looking for a guy that rides a motorcycle. I'm looking for an auto parts store. I'm looking for anything that might have somebody that can help me out. And I pull into this advanced auto parts store. And I'm just, at this point, I'm hoping somebody knows a guy and can help me out. And I pull in, I walk in, I explain my situation. I can't even get the situation completely out of my mouth before the guy behind the clerk pulls out his cell phone and starts dialing his friends. Just say, hey, you had a motorcycle at one time. Hey, there's this guy here. He's doing this thing. Can you come and help me? And I was on the phone with like 4 guys trying to get them to come and help me. Didn't work. So I'm talking to this guy, John. That's the guy who helped me on the left there. And he's giving me full control over the store. He's allowing me to take over the parking space in the park, take my bike apart, do whatever I want to do. And he's providing me with all the tools to do it. And if they don't have it in the shop tools, he's taking it off the shelf, pulling the tag off of it, and just giving it to me. So I probably spent 5 hours at this place, taking apart my front wheel, the brakes, trying to figure everything out. And this guy, John, every half hour, because he does have a job, he'll come out and probably spend 20 minutes. And then he'll go back in for a half hour, come back out for another 20 minutes. It really, really touched me. So then I drove into Biloxi, Mississippi, and it's like a miniature Las Vegas. I don't know if anybody's ever been there, but it's like there's casinos lining this main drag. At this point I'm on US 90, and there's just casinos everywhere, and I had no idea that was going on down there, so I stopped and looked around. And okay, so I head down US 90. It's dark out. It's I'm looking for a place to stay, and at this point, this stretch US 90 has been hit really hard by Katrina. So just like Detroit, I'm driving along and I'm heading west, and to my left is the water. To my right are these roads to nowhere. There are the neighborhoods are there, the plots of land are there, but the houses are gone. There's nothing there. And so I'm probably maybe half mile in the middle of these two little outcroppings of actual stores. One thing is Waffle Houses are made of brick, and every Waffle House in the area is still standing after Katrina. It's just, so you'll have this stretch, and then there'll be a random Waffle House in the middle of it's weird. But so I'm stopped. I take my camera out. I walk out to the water, and it's nice. It's calm. It's very nice because there's nobody around. There's cars going by behind me, but it's nobody to talk to. It's very quiet. I've walked about 50 yards out to the beach, and I go back to my bike, and I'm rummaging through stuff, and all of a sudden, this girl appears out of nowhere, and she starts talking to me, and I'd already had my camera set up at this point, so I said, "Hey, like, when you meet somebody, and you just you can tell that something's off, something's not right. There's a certain feeling you get around." Well, I got that feeling with her, and she had a bicycle with her, and I said, "Hey, this is what I'm doing. Do you want to sit down? We'll just chat for a little bit, tell you your story." So we sat down. We talked for like 45 minutes in the rain on the side of US 90 outside of Gulfport, Mississippi. And this woman, she was going on to tell me, so we sat down, and it starts normal, like, "Where are you from? What are you doing?" And she's saying stuff, and one thing after another, it's just not adding up. The stories aren't clicking. The timelines don't make sense. The people she's talking about just are very weird. And so she starts telling me that, and then I knew. So she starts telling me that she is a Wolferian. Anybody know what a Wolferian is? No, I didn't either. And a Wolferian is a group of people who, do you guys know what furries are? Furries are people that dress up as animals and then go and act as their spirit animal, and they have weird conventions, and it's very, very, very bizarre. And so this is, I guess, a type of a Wolferian. So she was telling me about these organizations that they go to, and they go and they put on tails and they put on wolf things, and they'll go around howling at people, and that's just how they spend their time, just howling. And I asked her to repeat herself because I couldn't understand why that was something that people got along doing, and so. So the conversation continues, and she tells me that she's, her friends are Wolferians, but she only participates sometimes. She'll put on a yarn tail sometimes. And it goes on, and she starts telling me how her friends, these Wolferians, get kidnapped because there's Wolferian hunters. And Wolferian hunters will come and snatch you. And they'll snatch you and never take you back. Like you are gone for good. And she has many friends that have been snatched by the Wolferian hunters. And so, yeah, I'm glad you weren't there because you would have made me laugh. I was like, yeah, seriously, like how do you maintain your, and I'm trying to be, I don't know what could have happened if I had lost composure, but I'm like, you just kind of, okay, tell me more. So she goes on to say that these Wolferians get snatched and taken away, and they never return, and she never hears from them again, except on Facebook when they appear, like a couple years later. They'll be on Facebook, and she goes on Facebook, and she's friends with these Wolferians, and they now live in the UK because they've been sent there, and that's the thing. And then she tells me that she's more popular, she has more friends than Justin Bieber. And at this point, I'm like, okay, all right, I get it. And so she's totally off the rockers. And so is the audio, is it no dice? Okay. Well, I was with this woman for so long, it was at the end of the day, the microphone on my camera died. Then the camera died itself. But the conversation was getting so good. It was getting so good. She was telling me how when she was 12, she was dating a gang member, and then she would go around to these bad neighborhoods and tell people she was a Latin king and do all these weird gang initiatives. And she's 12. So fast forward to now, she's 19. And she's telling me this story about how she was in an institution. She said she's very familiar with the workings and the goings-on of an institution, so I asked her to elaborate. And she says she was institutionalized for knowing too many governmental secrets, as she put it. And she was going in and telling me how she knows where Area 51 is. She knows that Area 51 is a thing. She knows that Area 51 is a thing potentially in Salem, Massachusetts. And she was going on to tell about her friend. They would smoke the peace pipe, and I asked her what the peace pipe was, and apparently it was this non-nicotine leaf that they would smoke just to make smoke, and they would talk. She was telling me about how she and her friend were walking to a store, and the police were called on her because she was talking to herself. But no, her friend was right there. Not really. Her friend wasn't there. And so she went on talking about how she had this encounter with the police, and it was just kind of sad that this woman, she's 19, living in Gulfport, Mississippi. It was one of those things that when the conversation ended, it was all funny. The context was really hilarious, and it was just not good. I make it through Louisiana. This is St. Louis Cemetery number 2. It's not St. Louis Cemetery number 1 like in Easy Rider. But I ended up making it to Arizona eventually. I'll just let this play through. I ended up making it to Arizona, and by the time I got to Arizona, the motorcycle was in bad shape. Burned out a bunch of tires. The whole front end was destroyed. I took the front wheel completely apart in a shop, and it was blown to pieces. And I spent 2 weeks in Arizona trying to get parts sent to me. They would send the wrong part, or they wouldn't send the part. It would be in a shop in Phoenix. And it was just miserable. I was supposed to meet some hospitals in Tucson, and the kids weren't there. They were healthy, thank God. That's Juarez, Mexico, going through El Paso. You can see it over the border. But anyway, when I left Tucson, at the end of this trip, I still had to make it across the country again. And if you'll remember, in mid-January, those 2 really bad snowstorms, I was on a motorcycle for 7 days, stuck in those coming back. So it was just it was horrible. It was freezing cold. I remember crying in my helmet because I couldn't feel my feet, and I had to look at my hands to make sure that they were actually doing the controls of the motorcycle. It was miserable. I remember pulling into, that's a picture from one of the kids. I flew back in the middle of the trip to a hospital in Massachusetts, and this young boy, Austin, drew that picture for me. So coming back was not as fun as going back, or going west. But I learned a lot about myself. You spend so much time on a motorcycle, and I listen to music sometimes, but for the most part, you're in your own head. And I failed at the trip that I had originally planned. It didn't work out the way I wanted it to. And coming back, at this point, I was already invited to give this speech, and I was really concerned. I was like, I failed at this. Like, how am I going to go talk about failure? But I realized I didn't fail. I just learned a different lesson. That right there is it's Mount Lemmon, Arizona. There's people, everywhere you looked, people would just be rappelling down cliffs. But I was standing right there, and this older gentleman from England came up to me, and we started talking. Turns out he used to race in the Isle of Man TT, on the Isle of Man, and he told me about this motorcycle crash where he was like 17. He hit a curb, the bike flipped up, went through the front store window of what would have been like Murray's Toggery Shop, at doing work on the bike. But anyway, I failed at this trip. And I realized I didn't fail. I just learned a different lesson. The trip that I set out on was completely different than what I wanted, but I was able to meet a tremendous amount of people. I was able to see a lot of different things, and I've driven across the country many times in a car. But this was the first time I did any extensive, this is about 4 or 5 weeks on the road. It was an incredible experience, and I hope to do it again come fall when it's maybe a little bit warmer. I ran out of gas there in New Mexico. Had to hitchhike to a gas station. But I mean, the point I want to make with this thing is you may set off and try to do one thing, and if you fail, you're just learning another lesson, and you can't beat yourself up over that kind of thing. You guys, I really appreciate you coming here and listening to what I have to say. It means a lot to have you here.
Thank you again to everyone for coming. We don't have too much time for formal questions right now, but if anybody would like to come up and ask David a question, we can certainly do that, for the next few minutes or so. So thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys.